Welcome back to another episode of Mr. M Rocks. Last time we left off with this HTML sheet. And so this HTML page has 4 visible divs. It has a header, a navigation div, right panel, and body. And I'm not really begun styling this yet. I just put some background color to sort of differentiate between where they are. All 4 are located inside of an outer wrapper div, and we can see that over here. The HTML code is really simple. In the head, I have my link to the external style sheet called EME styles, and this is in the same folder as my index. So index and EME styles are in the same folder, and here I have my wrapper div. I'm using Notepad++ so that when I highlight one div, it automatically highlights its partner. And the same thing here, 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 and here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the page. We're going to make some changes in CSS mostly, a little bit of changes in HTML, and we're going to change the page so it looks like this. Notice I have a simple animation on the top, which I don't particularly care for on my main page, but just to see how to embed a little Swift file, we're going to do that. Notice also these buttons have rounded corners, and we have, this is my wrapper div. I threw in an outer wrapper, and I have borders with certain styles on them, and that's where we're going. So let's go ahead and get started with that. I will have to add some button divs up in here, and the way that I'm going to do that is I need to have, I'm going to put 5 buttons. I know that this is 800 pixels wide, so let's see, 5 is going to go into 800 about looks like 160 times. So to do this, I'm simply going to go into my nav div, so that's the green bar here, and I will go inside this. I'll hit return, and I'm going to, inside here, I will put my div called button div, and home is going to be the first button, and then I'm going to paste that in again. The second button will be let's say family, and then we'll keep doing this. Maybe I'll have one that talks about my classes. So for our final project, we are going to have a total of 5 pages. Maybe I'll have one for bio, and everybody's just going to look a little bit different, but the final one has to be our portfolio. So all of the flash work we do and so forth is going to go into our portfolio page. Okay. So that looks like I'm good to go, and if I were to reload this right now, that doesn't look very good, but that's okay because we're going to go ahead and change the way these divs are styled in CSS. So to do that, I'll come over here. Let's see, did I mention that the class name I'm using is button div? So all of these have the same, so whatever style I use in CSS, because I'm using class instead of the ID tag, I'm going to apply the same style to every one of them, which is what I want to do for this particular project. In any case, if I say nav div and I come down here, paste that in, and just change these 3 letters to button, make sure I leave my period there, so that's the identifier that this is a class, and now I need to put some other things in here. So I'll put, for instance, color will be orange, and the width for each one of these is going to be less than 800. The whole green nav bar is 800, so dividing that by 5 I get 160, but I also need some space for my borders and so forth, so I'm going to start off by making it, let's make it 150, and I'll go ahead and change this to 40, and now when I take a look at this, it still doesn't look very good. Notice it's all pushed up along the side here. The reason for that is I haven't said anything about the positioning. So let's do this now. I need to say position, and the position is going to be floating, and I'm going to float each one of these in order. I'm going to float to the left, and so now right away when I do this, okay, they're floating. Now I can't see the border, and the reason I can't see the border is I don't have a border in here yet. So let me put a border in, and border is going to be, let's say, gray, and I will make that 3px for pixels. And now I'll see a border around each of these guys, or I should see a border. Did I spell something wrong? Border gray, let's say solid gray 3px. and that's on my button div. So make sure it's saved, reloaded, and there they are. Okay, now I have them all bumped up against each other, so what I'm going to do is a couple of things. I will change the background color, I think, of the nav div at this point to black. So from green, I'll change that guy to black. And I need to have a little bit of space between them, and I can do that by, after my button, I can say margin, and I can change the margin to, let's just change it to 3px and see what that does. And if I do that, okay, now it pushed them over a little bit too far, so I can see that the width is okay, but there's not enough room for this last one, so he got pushed over. He pushed this guy over because these guys are all floating. This guy got pushed over, this guy pushed down. I can change all of that by just making the button a little bit more narrow. And so to do that, if I go back to my button div, and instead of making it 150, let's make it 145, and let's see what that does. Reload it, and now they all fit in there okay. I can also say, notice it's got more space over here than over here, and I could, if I wanted to, I could say margin left, and I could change that to just 3 pixels, and so that's going to push everything over from the left, and now I can bump them over just by adding more to the margin here. So the margin left, I'm going to go, let's try making that 6. And we'll tweak that a little bit later, but anyway, just to get the idea, we can push everything over a little bit that way. If I made each one of these guys just a hair wider, that would probably be good, but I'll worry about that later. Okay, so at this point, I think I need to put my header, I'm going to make my header black, I'm going to make my body gray, and I can do that by coming over to my header and making that black. And actually I'm going to put a animation there, and so I can do that right now. To do my animation, first of all I should get rid of, inside of my header, I'll get rid of the word header, and I am going to put into the header, I'm going to use the embed tag, and I'm going to embed, and I just need to go ahead and put my source in there. So I'll come back and do that in just a moment. But before I do that, let's change the color of the body. So let's see, the body is going to be down here. I think I'll make the body gray. And I think I'm ready to put some styles into my borders. The other thing is, notice this is just a gray border that goes around. And so what I want to have happen is I want there to be an outer wrapper that's going to go around this whole thing, and there's going to be borders around these main key parts, not around the body. And so to do that, I'll come back to my HTML, and right above the wrapper div, I'm simply going to put in another div, and this one will be very similar to this div. So I'm going to copy him and paste him right here, and instead of a wrapper, I'm going to have an outer wrapper div, and I will simply end him right here with my end div tag. Okay, good. Now, to style the outer wrapper div, I'm going to copy that name. I'm also going to, well, you know what, I should copy this. I'll just copy this whole thing, paste him right there, just put the word in here, outer with a capital W, and now that div is ready to go. Let's change the background color here to blue so we can see it for a little bit, and the size is going to be 9 by 9, floating auto margins. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens here. Okay, so I can see where the outer wrapper is. Now I don't like the fact that this is way up high on top, so I'm going to put some margin around that. So remember, padding is on the inside and margin is on the outside. So I can put margin around my wrapper, or I can put padding around my outer wrapper. And so, you know what, I think I'll put margin around, or padding around my outer wrapper. So let's try that. I'm going to come into my outer wrapper, and I'm going to say padding, and I'll say top, and I want this to come down, let's say 50px, and now it will push this whole guy down a little bit. Okay, so that looks good. The reason I want this too is that I'm not going to leave this blue here. I'm going to have a background image that's going to go through the whole background. So when I come back, I want to go ahead and put a background image here. I'm going to put a flash movie up here. But right before we do that, let's do a couple more things to stylize these different parts and these borders that I have. And to stylize the borders, I'm going to go into my button div. I've already got my border here, solid gray, 3 pixels. And I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say border style. Okay, so border style now. And the border style, I'm going to say outset. And let's see what that does. Now, since all of my buttons are using the same class name, this should do the same thing to all. Let's see what it does. And it's a little bit hard to see because I have a background. Let me change my nav div for a moment to white, just so we can see what's going on. And we're going to find out that what this did was it made a dark edge around the bottom and a light edge on top. So it makes it look like it's 3-dimensional popping out. Now notice I have a little bit of space here, but I don't have any space on top. I can set that by just adding a little bit of margin to the top of my nav div, or padding rather. So I'm going to go to my nav div, and I'm going to say padding top, and let's just make this 5px, and that should drop that down a little bit, and it did not. Maybe I don't have enough space to move it down. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I spelled padding wrong, so let's go ahead and change that. Padding top, 5px, reload. So that came down a little bit. That looks good. Okay, so we can see a little bit more clearly now. That's a dark edge and a light edge. So that's what happened when we used the style outset. And so now we're going to come back into our button div, and we've got border style outset. Now we're going to add one more, and this is actually 2 more. One is going to be border style, and this is going to be ridge. And ridge is going to do the same thing on the inside of my button. It's going to make it look like it's got a little inside edge. So now it looks like the inside of this is dark and this side is light. So in any case, it makes it look like it looks 3-dimensional. Alright, the last thing I want to do is change the radius so that we have a little rounded edge there. And so I'll do that by coming in one more time, and I'll say border radius. So border radius. And I guess we'll set that to something small to begin with, 5px, just so we can see it working. Reload, and now they have a little rounded edge. If I wanted to change that to, say, 15, border radius, let's change that to 15, and we can see that that's going to be quite a bit more. And I'm going to change my background now back to black. Notice that these guys are all, these words are all pushed over to the side too, so I should change that. But in any case, for right now, we're going to change the background of the nav div back to black, and we're going to set the button div, let's change the font. I'll put the font down at the bottom, and we'll say text align, and we'll say center, text align center. And now the background is black and the text is aligned in the center. I don't like the fact that the text is right up against the top, so something I can do to change that is that I can go ahead and say inside this button I can put some padding inside this guy, so I'll put that right up in here, right after my borders. Before my positioning, I'll put my padding, and I'll say padding is going to be, actually let's make it padding top. I only want to do the top. So padding top, and we'll do, I don't know, let's do, we'll try 10 pixels. If that's too much, we can change it. That looks like it might be too much. But I can change that by changing the size. So I can change the height of this whole guy to, let's try to 30. And let's bring this from 10 back down to, let's say, 5. See what that does. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now these aren't going to be functional buttons until the next lesson, but for right now I just want to make sure we saw what they looked like. Alright, so at this point, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add an image in the back. I'm going to add some flash here. I'm going to change the color and add a couple more borders. So let's put borders around the outer div. Now I'm going to take this same stuff I just did, border solid gray, all the way down to there. And I'm going to copy that in my other div. So I'm going to come, let's see, it's right below the height. So I'm going to put right below the height here. And let's see, that's in the outer wrapper. So if I reload that, now that guy has an outer wrapper. You know what, I don't think I like the radius on that. So I'll take this part out and just leave him with square edges, or square corners I should say. And so again, I've got my 3 borders, my 3 border styles, and I'll put that as well on the wrapper div. We'll put it right under height again, just so they're easier to find if I stay consistent. And I think that will be good for right now. Okay, in the next segment I'm going to add a background image, I'm going to add a flash movie here, and I'm going to move this whole chunk down to the bottom, and so that's coming up in just a moment. Okay, running out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, but so 2 things we want to add to this right now. We've got our borders in the right places. I want to change this guy so that it's down on the bottom, so let's do that. I'm going to change the this name from let's see, this guy is not going to be right panel anymore. I'm going to change him to footer div, and I want him to be placed in the page after the body, so I have to physically cut him out, move him after the body, and I'm going to have to change the size of these guys so that they look where I want them. So the body now has to be wider, so he's going to come all the way over here to the edge, and the footer is going to be down here at the bottom, so he will be wider as well. So to do that, I need to change the name of my right panel to footer. It doesn't matter what order these guys come in, but my footer now is going to have a width of 800, and it will have a height of, oh, let's say 40. Okay. I'm also going to use the same border information I have for the other guys down here on this guy in the bottom. And so I'll just copy that and paste that down in my footer div. And I have the other guys right below the height, so I'll put him there. And if I do that now, that will be that will change things. But notice I have a background color that's gray, so let's say my footer div, actually my footer div appears to be missing. So let's go ahead and change the body div to 800. So he is now the same width, he's still gray. Let's see, I'm not sure why I've lost my body, but let's go ahead and put that in. Or the footer rather. The footer is down here, and the footer is background color is black, so he for some reason is not showing up. Maybe, I'm not sure, maybe there's just not enough room, maybe he's getting buried. Let me change the body height to 400 and see if he shows up. No. Okay, so I'll have to look for that in a minute. Let's go ahead and put the flash up in the top, and we'll put the picture in the background. That's really simple. To put the background image in this header, I simply have to go into my HTML. Remember, HTML is content. Oh, I think that's why I didn't have that guy saved. There he is. So I hadn't saved my HTML code. And so my footer now needs to go down a little bit deeper. So I'll say my footer, my body rather, is going to push my footer down. So here's my body. Maybe I'll make my body white just so that we can see where the body is. And I'll change this back to something like 600. And now when I push that down, I've got my footer down below and my body's there. Okay, good. So let's change the body now that I can see everything. We'll change that back in a minute. Okay, so the header, let's go ahead and put inside the header. We go back, since we're putting a movie in, that's a content issue, so we're going to go into the div tag in the HTML, and back where it says embed, I'm going to say src for source is equal to, and I simply am going to put the name of my file, and my file is going to be header3.swf. And so if I put that guy in here now, let's see what happens, reload it, and that is not where I want them. And the reason for that is that I haven't put any size in here. So let's go ahead and say, inside here, I will say the height should be the same as my project, which I believe is 120 for the height. And the width is going to be 800. And so I just say 800 here. And now I've got my height, my width, my source file all lined up. If I reload that, not even close. So embed source, that looks good, that looks good, that looks good. And I've got 2 of these guys, so I'll get rid of that. Try one more time. Is this going to do it? And there it goes. Okay, so that's looking better. Now I want to go ahead and put inside the background, I want to put an image. And so that is going to be, I can do that from the CSS. I'm going to come over here into CSS, and where I go into the outer wrapper, I'm going to put in a background image. I'll go right under background color, and I'll say background image. And all I need to do in CSS is tell the code where that's going to be. So I'm going to use the attribute URL, and inside the parentheses I need to put the name of the file. So I use a single quote, and it's called bg.jpg. It's a JPEG, and that looks good. And so now if I say go ahead and put that in and reload this, now I've got that background image. Okay, good. I'll change this last bit here to white, or from white to black again, because I don't like the color. And so that guy's going to go back to black. And finally, those 2 oranges don't match. I can fix that later. The final thing is I want the background of the entire page to be black. And so what I can do for that is, instead of using a class, I can just use the body tag. That's an HTML tag. And I'm going to say in here, same thing I did down here, background color. And the background color of this is not going to be blue. The background color is going to be black. And now I think I'm good to go. So that's it for tonight. Bye-bye.